Hello my fellow engineers, today we're breaking down the EB-06 Graze. But before we dive into the suit itself, let's take a quick look on how the Graze came to be. Now after the Calamity War, Gjallarhorn began reorganizing his mobile suit forces. Although the Gundam's frames proved to be extremely effective, their frames were not suitable for mass production for several reasons. As a result, Gjallarhorn looked at another frame to see if it could be produced, but on a wider scale. This led them to the Valkyrie frame. Now the Valkyrie frame was produced in very small numbers, believed to be around 9 or 10 units. Unlike the Gundam frame, the Valkyrie was a low energy, high performance frame. And what made it even a better candidate was that it was not designed for anti-mobile armor combat, which was made it far more simpler than the Gundam frame itself. Now, Gjallarhorn needed a mobile suit that could act as a deterrent for the new era. However, the Valkyrie frame itself was actually still quite difficult to mass produce. To solve this issue, Gjallarhorn actually downsized the Valkyrie frame into the Gadwell frame, resulting in the EB-04 Gadwell, a post-Calamity War mobile suit. Over time, the Gadwell frame actually was further refined and perfected into a design that was easier to produce, more cost-effective, and carefully engineered for general purpose use. And this design actually matured through roughly 300 years of post-Calamity War development. It could adapt to various environments and utilize different loadouts to meet mission requirements. It was lighter, simpler, and used far less structured material, which made it far easier to maintain. This final evolution became known as the Graze frame, and the mobile suit that would go on to become Gjallarhorn's mainline units using this frame was the EB-06 Graze. Now that you have a brief introduction to the Graze, we'll be taking a closer look to the suit and ranking it across the Graze's scorecard. Now, based on a comment from the last video, we're also going to add cost effectiveness to the scoring category. This means we'll be covering weapons, armor, mobility, versatility, and now, cost effectiveness. Now the Graze could actually be equipped with a wide variety of weapons, ranging from long range to close range combat. However, some heavier weapons, such as the 320mm bazooka and the Donslav, require parts of the mobile suits to be swapped out in order to be used. While this is not a major issue in planned operations, it does present limitations in reactive situations. For example, if a Graze unit is caught in an ambush without the proper configurations, its access to those weapons becomes irrelevant, unless the Graze itself was the one conducting those ambushes. Now, I will say one advantage of this is that if the bazooka or the Donslav system are mounted directly onto the mobile suits, this actually reduces the risk of losing valuable weapons during combat, unless they are physically destroyed. And if the bazooka is depleted, it could actually fold out of the way rather than being discarded. And that being said, the most common range weapon used by the Graze is the 120mm rifle, which features 2 magazines, one mounted on each side. Now the rifle could also be converted into a short rifle by replacing the sensor-equipped barrel with a shorter one. While this reduces range and accuracy, it actually pars well with close combat tactics, particularly if it's being used alongside the battle axe. And speaking of the battle axe, due to the effectiveness of nano-laminate armor, blunt force melee weapons are highly effective in this era. The battle axe actually capitalizes on this, delivering strong striking power capable of overwhelming the armor through sheer impact. And not all Grazes use the battle axe. There's some variants that actually use something called the battle blade. One of those variants are the ground type variants. They often employed the battle blade because it was a lighter melee weapon designed to place minimum strain on the Graze's already stressed posture and altitude control systems under gravity. And despite its lighter weight, the battle blade still delivers significant destructive power, making it a practical choice for ground operations. The Graze could also be equipped with shields, again is more common on the ground types to improve defensive capabilities. The EB-06S Graze commander type also uses the same weapons as the standard Graze does. And there are some notable downsides. Like the bazooka, the Donslav mounted Graze actually require significant equipment and limb changes. along with sensor modifications. More importantly, the Donslav is actually a banned weapon, usable only under very specific conditions, typically when another party is already deployed one. It also requires a coordinated team, as the system needs both a shooter and a loader, and because of these constraints and the fact that not every Gjallarhorn ship would realistically carry these systems, it is not a practical everyday weapon. Outside of the extreme scenarios, such as the return of mobile armors, it is largely a situational weapon rather than a standard issue one. And honestly, this doesn't deduct points nor doesn't add any points to it. This is just a situational weapon that requires a particular situation to go down for Gjallarhorn to bring these out. The Graze does not employ any beam weapons, but within the Iron-Blooded Orphan setting, this is not a major drawback. Its reliance on conventional, low-energy weapons reduces logistical strain and allows it to potentially use a wide range of compatible armaments if necessary. Overall, while the Graze loadout is fairly basic, it is flexible and effective enough so that the suit is not a pushover. So the Graze weapons package is solid, but it's not remarkable. It lacks a specialization without the additional equipment. Yet, it does remain pretty adaptable and reliable in standard combat roles. So I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. It's slightly above average if it sticks to the more common loadout. In the Iron-Blooded Orphans universe, nano-laminate armor became the standard of the era. Nearly every warship and most mobile weapons are coated with this material, and for good reason. Nano-laminate armor is extremely durable, requiring heavy blunt force impacts or sustained fire to penetrate effectively. And as I mentioned earlier, this is exactly why weapons like the Battle Axe pair so well with a Graze. If a Graze wants to seriously damage armor at a close range, blunt force weapons are its best option. And against range attacks, especially from beam weapons, the Graze benefits greatly from its armor and shield. And knowing that the Graze shield is initially a solid layer of nano-laminate armor, I will feel at least somewhat confident of surviving a hit from a beam cannon. And that said, even with this level of protection, the Graze is still a general purpose mobile suit and not a true anti-mobile armor unit. And while the armor allows it to survive in extreme combat environments, it does not magically elevate the Graze into a Gundam level machine. I wouldn't expect it to win against a mobile armor, but I would feel confident that the suit could take punishment and keep fighting long enough to matter. And honestly, there's very few negatives to point out here. The Graze armor is tough enough to handle engagements against other mobile suits and prolonged combat scenarios. While the frame is not entirely nano-laminate coated like the Gundam frame, it is more than significant to absorb damage and remain combat effective, unless it encounters an opponent that could, simply hit harder than it could withstand. Now, the Graze's outside armor was nano-laminate, but not the frame. In order for the Graze to be easily mass-produced, the frame was not made out of nano-laminate. But the Graze's armor is still strong, is still reliable, and is still well suited to his role as a frontline mass production unit. So for that, I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. Now the Graze base frame ability is, fairly basic. On its own, the suit can run and jump in ground combat, but that's largely the extent of his unassisted movement capabilities. In practice, however, the Graze are almost always seen equipped with a booster's unit. When operating under gravity, a booster can be mounted on the rear skirt armor, significantly improving its ground mobility. For space operations, an almost identical booster can be mounted on the back, allowing the Graze to function effectively in zero-gravity environments. When compared to the kinds of mobile suits it would most commonly encounter, such as, for example, the Spinner Rhodey, the Graze had demonstrated superior mobility. It is clearly more agile as well as responsive than many older pre-Calamity War mobile suits. Additionally, certain ground-type variants could be equipped with a ground-use booster unit. It was an optional system that further enhanced mobility under gravity and even allowed the Graze to traverse large bodies of water. Overall, there isn't a great deal to criticize or praise beyond this point. For its time, the Graze was one of the most advanced mass production mobile suits available. Designed as a deterrent to counter the widespread use of standard mobile suits, and enforce order. In that role, its mobility is more than adequate. That said, the Graze does lose its points because it relies heavily on external equipment to reach its full mobility potential. While the suit does have leg-mounted thrusters protected by armor, these alone are not enough to bring out its maximum performance. To truly perform well in ground operations or space combat, additional equipment must be swapped in, which limits flexibility. The Graze mobility is solid but equipment dependent, so I'll give it a 6 out of 10, slightly above average. The Graze, or particularly the Graze frame, proved to be extremely versatile. Gjallarhorn appears to have developed equipment for nearly every role the Graze could possibly be expected to perform. The suit could be fitted with booster packs that allow it to operate effectively in both ground and space environments. Its shoulder components can easily be swapped out for a shoulder-mounted bazooka, which folds out when needed and further expanding its combat flexibility. This versatility extends even to ground deployment logistics. Ground-type Graze could actually be equipped with a ground booster pack, allowing it to travel over large bodies of water. This enables the Graze to be deployed directly from a carrier and reach land on its own without requiring additional transport, greatly increasing its operation flexibility during planetary deployments. The reliability of the Graze frame is further demonstrated by the number of variants developed from it. One standout example is the AEB-06L Loek Graze. Developed after the Battle of Edmonton, this export-oriented mobile suit was created by Gjallarhorn to meet the defensive needs of the 4 economic blocks, and was also sold to civilian operators. While it was a downgraded unit and clearly inferior to the standard Graze, its existence highlights just how adaptable and scalable the Graze frame truly is. Now, the Graze consistently shows it has a solution for nearly any environment it is deployed in. Even if in extreme scenarios, and let's just say hypothetically, if mobile armor starts to make a return, the Graze could just adapt by using the down-slave weapons that only require a few minor part changes. While the Graze does rely heavily on additional equipment, and the base unequipped configuration is rarely seen, this dependence does not significantly undermine its overall flexibility. The Graze is an acceptably adaptable mobile suit capable of being configured to handle almost any mission profile it faces. And for that, I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. I believe it is very versatile. The Graze frame was built to replace the Garel frame, and from the start it was designed to be lighter, simpler, and constructed using far less structural material, making it cheaper to produce. The frame's high productivity, excellent operability, and strong energy efficiency already made it an inherently cost-effective platform, in both of operational demands and overall expense. One of the biggest strengths is that it can operate in nearly any environment simply by switching out its equipment, rather than requiring the development and production of entirely new mobile suits. This modular approach significantly reduced the long-term costs. Even during the events of Season 2, when newer mobile suits enter into service, the Graze still could not be fully replaced, highlighting just how economical and practical the platform remained. And all of this was on purpose. The Graze design actually focused on ease of maintenance and ease of production, which further reinforces its cost effectiveness. As a deterrence-focused mobile suit, it tended to maintain law and order. It did not need cutting-edge performance, just reliability, sensibility, and honestly, numbers. Now, if Gjallarhorn ever needed to reduce costs or rapidly increase its force size, it could just rely on the Loek Graze, which was a simplified version of the same frame. The Ariane Rod fleet even used this variant of the Graze primarily in rear support roles. It just demonstrates just how the platform could be scaled down without abandoning its core design. The ability to reuse the same frame for both standard and simplified variants makes the Graze an ideal platform for maintaining numbers without excessive spending. I'm gonna have to give it an 8 out of 10. Overall, I give the Graze a 7.4 out of 10. I would trust and recommend this mobile suit to be part of my fleet, but knowing that it could be adapted to handle extreme situations, whether that's engaging a mobile armor or doing a orbital bombardment, that's a lot of confidence to a platform. That ability to bolt on equipment as needed, or even supplement the lineup with their Loek Grazes, which makes the Graze family even more appealing, to be honest. That said, I wouldn't just deploy the highlight Grazes too widely, as I view them the same as the ball from Universal Century. I believe they're useful and cost effective, and even viable, but to the right role. But that's not something that I would want to be making up the core of my front lines. But what do you think? Do you agree with this score? Was I too harsh in certain areas, or maybe not harsh enough? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you guys want to see more Gundam content, hit that like and subscribe button. Farewell, my fellow engineers.